Till that day, I barely thought about safety. I lived quietly in this old apartment complex where anyone could walk in because the front door didn't even lock. I was 25, working at an electronics store, and honestly believed that a regular guy like me had nothing to be afraid of. Turns out, I was very wrong. It all started when I was about to head out on a weekend morning. It was around 9. I got dressed, grabbed my keys and wallet, turned the latch, pulled the door open, stepped out, and went to lock it the way I always did. But the key wouldn't go in. At all. It felt like the lock was completely jammed. I leaned closer and saw a broken key stuck in the keyhole. It wasn't mine. I checked my own keychain. Everything was intact. Whoever broke it snapped it cleanly, leaving the thin part inside, and there was no way to pull it out. I figured some idiots must have been messing with locks during the night and snapped a key. Maybe they confused the doors. All the doors in the complex looked the same. Same paint, tiny numbers. But the thought that someone had been standing at my door in the middle of the night trying to get in, that stuck with me in a bad way. I went down to the manager's office, showed a photo of the lock, explained what happened. They just shrugged and said they had a locksmith, but I'd have to pay for it myself because it's not their fault. Great. About an hour and a half later, the locksmith showed up. He worked on the lock, removed it, dug the broken piece out and showed it to me like a trophy, asked if it was mine. I said no. He gave this weird little grunt, but didn't comment. Installed a new cylinder, handed me 2 keys, took the payment, and left. Honestly, by the evening I was already letting it go. Maybe someone really did mix up the doors and snap the key by accident. A couple days later, I stopped thinking about it completely. And then came that night. I don't know why I woke up. I just opened my eyes and realized I wasn't asleep anymore. The room was dark except for the faint glow from the streetlight leaking through the blinds. My phone on the nightstand said 3:17. I rolled onto my side, ready to drift off again. The apartment was almost silent. And then, in that silence, I realized I was hearing something besides my fridge and AC. Someone was messing with my door. The sound wasn't loud, like someone carefully shifting a big ring of keys. I lay there for about 10 seconds, hoping I was imagining it. But the sound came again, then again, with small pauses. And every time it was painfully clear, it was right at my door. I slowly sat up, trying not to make a sound. I needed to be sure. Then I got up and stepped into the hallway, and the noise got clearer, like someone sorting through keys, then sliding one into the lock, turning it slightly, scraping metal, pausing, and starting over. I reached for my phone. At first I thought about calling a friend, but realized how stupid that was. The only number that made sense at that moment was 911. The sound didn't stop while I dialed. At one point, mixed with the keys, I heard a faint creak, someone pressing harder on the handle, checking if the door would give. The new lock held, but the fact that someone outside was testing it was enough to make my stomach drop. The operator picked up almost immediately. I kept my voice low but clear, trying not to sound hysterical. I said I was alone, that someone was right now trying to get into my apartment, and that it sounded like they had a whole set of keys and were trying them one by one. I said I didn't hear any voices and had no idea if it was one person or more or whether they were armed. They asked the usual questions and told me a patrol was already on the way and to stay on the line if I could. Something inside me snapped. Fear turned into anger. It pissed me off that someone thought it was normal to stand at my door at 3 a.m. and work at the lock like it was theirs. I walked up to the door as quietly as I could, then I suddenly slapped my palm against it and yelled something like, "Hey, what do you want? Get the hell out of here. I already called the police." My voice cracked halfway through, but it was loud enough. For a second, everything went silent. I held my breath. I could hear my heartbeat and the faint hum of a neighbor's AC. I started thinking maybe he got scared and left. And then the keys started again, the exact same sound. Like he didn't care at all that I was standing behind the door. My shouting did nothing. If anything, he got rougher. He yanked the lock hard a couple times and the whole door shook. The operator asked if I still heard him there. I said yes. They repeated that officers were on the way and that I shouldn't stand so close to the door, but standing in the middle of the room and just listening felt even worse. Time stretched. Every minute felt endless. The keys kept rattling, and the person kept trying one key after another, and I didn't hear a single word from him, not even a mutter. That silence scared me more than anything. If he'd said something, yelled, demanded, said he messed up the door, anything. But he was completely silent. Somewhere far away, I finally heard a siren. At first faint, like I imagined it, then a bit louder. I don't know if he heard it the same way I did, but at some point the sound of the keys stopped instantly. A couple seconds of quiet, then fast footsteps down the concrete hallway running toward the stairs. The police arrived about 3 minutes later. 2 officers came up, checked the door, the hallway. I let them in, told them everything I could, showed the lock, the scratches around it, the dirt marks on the mat. In the end, they wrote a report and asked the usual things, whether I had conflicts with anyone, owed money to anyone, had any recent arguments. I said no, just a regular life, regular job, no drama. They suggested installing an extra lock or at least a security bar inside. By the time they left, it was almost 5 in the morning. I didn't even try to sleep. I just sat in a chair facing the door and stayed there until sunrise, listening to every tiny sound in the hallway. At some point, I realized I no longer thought of my home as a place where I could feel safe. I never really thought about safety before that day. Life felt simple and quiet in our little suburban town outside Seattle. Green streets, clean sidewalks, good schools for the future, and the city only 30 minutes away. My husband works a lot, a whole office under him, constant meetings and calls. I'm on maternity leave, so my entire world right now is our townhouse complex, the nearest grocery store, and my morning runs with the baby in the jogging stroller. That morning around 8, I waited for my son to doze off after an early feeding. Then I dressed him warmly, buckled him in, checked all the straps. It was cool outside, but not cold. I stepped out, turned on the tracker on my watch, and started our usual route. I always followed the same path. 2 small loops around the neighborhood. Easy jog, comfortable pace, pushing the stroller in front of me. My son breathed softly, shifting a little now and then, but mostly sleeping. I could feel my body waking up, muscles settling into rhythm, my breathing leveling out. I turned onto a short connecting street between 2 longer parallel ones, and then I saw something ahead that definitely hadn't been there before. As I got closer, I realized there was a tent standing right in the middle of the sidewalk. A small, dirty blue tent, the cheap kind they sell at big supermarkets. It was set directly on the concrete, blocking the walkway completely. A few bags, an empty bottle, and a rag were scattered nearby. It was obvious right away that someone was living there. Someone had set up their spot exactly on the route I jog every day, and yesterday this stretch had been empty. I slowed to a walk and stopped about a meter from the tent. There was no way to pass straight through. It took up almost the entire width of the sidewalk. Cars were packed tightly along the curb, leaving only narrow gaps between them. The other side was the street. My only option was to carefully lower the stroller down to the road, go around the tent along the edge, and lift it back up on the sidewalk afterward. I glanced around. No cars nearby. The street was empty. It seemed safe enough. I sighed, adjusted my grip on the stroller, and started lowering the front wheels off the curb. The stroller jerked, tilted slightly, and my son woke up. At first, he made a small, unhappy sound. Then he started crying. I looked at the tent. It was zipped shut, the fabric trembling slightly in the wind. As I edged around it, halfway past, I saw the zipper twitch upward from the bottom. The flap lifted, and someone emerged from the darkness inside. A man crawled out, pushing himself up with his hands. His face was creased, unshaven, hair tangled. But the first thing I noticed wasn't the dirt or the smell. It was his eyes. He looked angry. Not groggy, not confused. Angry. My son's crying grew louder. I instinctively tried rocking the stroller with one hand while balancing it on the slanted edge of the road, but it didn't help. The crying only intensified. The man looked at me, then at the stroller, then back at me again. And suddenly he started talking, loud, sharp, like I'd done something horrible to him. He said we were stopping him from sleeping, that he already had nowhere to go, that he had the right to rest. His words spilled out non-stop with shouting, swearing, accusations. I won't even try to repeat everything he said. The gist was simple. I was the problem. Me, my baby, his crying. I tried to answer calmly, to say I was just passing through and didn't mean to bother him. I could feel fear rising inside me, but I forced myself to stay steady. I couldn't just turn around and leave. To do that, I'd have to maneuver the stroller again, and by now he was already standing, positioned between me and the clear part of the sidewalk. He started moving closer. The distance between us shrank fast. I had to step half a pace back toward the edge of the street. The stroller was still half on the asphalt, half on the curb, crooked. My baby was crying non-stop, and I felt control slipping away. He kept talking, but his tone was getting more aggressive. At some point, he shifted from complaints to threats. He accused me of being one of those people who didn't let him live, who thought they were better because they had a home and a child while he slept in a tent. I felt the situation spiraling, but what scared me most was that I physically couldn't just run. He came right up to me and grabbed my wrist. It happened so fast, I barely had time to flinch. His fingers were strong, rough, dirty. He squeezed so hard I felt pain instantly. And in that moment, all my politeness and attempts to reason ended. I screamed. A loud, panicked scream that ripped out of me on its own. I tried to yank my hand free, keep hold of the stroller, and step back without losing balance all at the same time. I don't know how long that moment lasted. Time stops during things like this. Suddenly, I heard someone shout behind me. When I turned, I saw a man in his 40s in sportswear running toward us. He stepped right between me and the homeless man, grabbed him by the arm, and struck down on it with his other hand. The homeless man cried out and let go of me. I shoved the stroller through the narrow gap between two cars and rushed several steps away. I hoped that was the end of it, that the homeless man would back off, they'd exchange a few words, and both walk away. But I was wrong. A moment later, a knife flashed in the homeless man's hand. The man who'd helped me tried to step back and shield himself, but he didn't react fast enough. The knife slashed across his forearm. He cried out and clutched his arm. Blood soaked through his light sweater almost immediately. The sight made my head spin, and I screamed again. The man pushed the attacker away and stumbled back to a safer distance. And then suddenly, the homeless man seemed to realize what he'd done. He looked around, turned, and ran. Just ran down the street with the knife still in his hand. Within seconds, he disappeared around the corner. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were shaking so badly I kept hitting the wrong numbers. The stroller was next to me, my baby still crying. The man sat on the sidewalk, holding his arm, blood slipping between his fingers. He was pale but conscious. I talked to the 911 operator while trying to help him as best I could. I heard sirens pretty quickly. Police and EMTs arrived almost at the same time. They took the man to the hospital. The police searched the area, checked the tent, talked to nearby residents. I knew they probably wouldn't catch him right away. People like that know how to disappear in a city. Since then, I've looked at tents around the city differently. I still understand that people end up on the street for many reasons, and that not everyone with a backpack and a dirty jacket is dangerous. But I don't believe in the idea of a completely safe neighborhood anymore. I've been living in Phoenix for 4 months now. I moved here when a new position opened up in our company's local branch. I chose a quiet, comfortable neighborhood and a modern apartment complex. That evening, I stayed at the office later than usual. It was the end of the reporting period, and I left around 10:45. My head was buzzing from numbers, and all I could think about was grabbing something simple for dinner, eating, and collapsing onto the couch. There's a 24-hour store on the way home, just 3 minutes from my place. The night was warm, like most nights in Phoenix, and the streets were almost empty. I walked along my usual route, past parked cars, feeling nothing except exhaustion. As I approached the store, I noticed a man standing near the corner of the building, close to the entrance. He was right at the edge where the light didn't reach as well. He wasn't smoking, wasn't on his phone, wasn't talking to anyone. He was just standing there, staring straight at me. There wasn't any obvious threat. He didn't move toward me, didn't say anything. But his stare was strange, fixed. He looked like he was waiting for me. I slowed for half a second, then pretended I hadn't noticed him, pulled the door open, and walked inside. The store was empty. One cashier behind the counter and the hum of refrigerators. I grabbed a basket and went down the aisles. Picked up milk, a frozen pizza, some cookies for tea. Normally, I can spend 10 minutes deciding what to buy, but this time, I just grabbed whatever I saw. On my way to the register, I glanced through one of the glass panels along the front wall and saw that the man was still there, still watching me. Maybe he'd been standing there the whole time I was shopping. When he noticed me looking, he turned away. After paying, I headed for the exit. As soon as the door closed behind me, I looked toward the corner. He was gone. I paused for a moment, scanned the area, trying to catch any movement, but there was no one. I told myself it was just a coincidence and that he'd probably left. Maybe he was waiting for someone or just spacing out. It happens. I adjusted the strap of my bag, shifted the grocery bags in my hands, and started walking home. It's about a 5-minute walk from the store to my complex. A straight path, along the street, down the sidewalk, across a single intersection, then a little farther to the glass entry door with the keypad. About a minute into the walk, I heard quiet footsteps behind me. I kept walking, didn't turn around. The steps weren't close, but not far either, keeping a steady distance. After a couple dozen steps, I finally glanced back. It was him, the same man from the store corner. He was following me, maybe 40 steps behind. The streetlights lit him well enough that I recognized him immediately. Same silhouette, same posture, and that same fixed stare. I whipped my head forward and picked up my pace. The footsteps behind me sped up too. That's when the uneasy feeling turned into real fear. Not panic, but a heavy, clear realization. This wasn't a coincidence. I was maybe 2 minutes from the complex gates when I suddenly heard a short, harsh, "Hey, stop, bitch," behind me. I dropped my grocery bags and ran as fast as I could. The entrance to my complex came into view, lit from above. The keypad was to the right of the glass door. I sprinted to the small platform in front of the entrance and started punching in the code. My fingers were shaking, and I hit the wrong number. On the second try, I heard the click. I yanked the door open, slipped inside, and leaned all my weight against it to shut it. At that exact moment, he reached the door and slammed his shoulder into it. The whole frame shook, but it held. I stepped back instinctively and looked straight at him. He was standing right in front of the glass. The light above the entrance lit his face. He just stood there, staring at me. A moment later, he hit the door again, right at the height of my face. The glass vibrated. I backed up another step, deeper into the lobby, toward the stairs. My hand was reaching for my phone in my bag, but I couldn't take my eyes off the door. I felt like if I blinked, he'd somehow be inside already. After a few seconds, he stopped, just stood and stared, then slowly looked up at the camera above the door, back at me, and stepped away. I watched him walk toward the street until his silhouette dissolved into the dark. I went upstairs, locked my door with every lock I had, and even wedged a chair under the handle. I barely slept, and only for a short time near morning. The next day, I called the management office and the police. The cops arrived quickly. One officer went through every detail: the time, his height, any features I remembered, his clothes. The other talked to the office staff and asked for the camera footage. After a while, one of the officers came back to me. He sat down, set his tablet on the table, studied it for a moment, and then said they'd run the man's face through the system. The entrance camera had caught a clear enough shot. He told me the man was already wanted for multiple assaults, including sexual assaults. A couple of those incidents involved women he had followed home. The officer said they'd add what happened near my complex to his case and asked me to be especially careful for the next few weeks, to avoid walking home alone late at night. Now a coworker walks me home every evening, and if I need groceries, I order delivery.